I want to talk about the Prisoner Review Board and kind of the history behind what's going on there. The recent tragic killing of an 11-year-old boy is not the beginning of the issues at the Prisoner Review Board. Last week, Governor Pritzker said he's working to make changes at the PRB, but the truth is, this is 100% a situation Governor Pritzker created. Honestly, I shudder to think what would be happening on the streets of Illinois if the PRB would look like today, what it looked like the last 3 or 4 years under this governor. If we hadn't called attention to what was happening over the last few years, the situation would be much worse. Under 3 prior governors, 2 Democrats and 1 Republican, the PRB voted far less often to release individuals, including convicted murderers. Statistically speaking, Governor Pritzker's PRB is more than twice as likely to release someone from prison. We're talking about people like the notorious Starved Rock killer, people like Paula Sims, multiple cop killers, child molesters, rapists. At one point, even Cook County State's Attorney Kim Foxx said she was concerned by the releases taking place from the Prisoner Review Board. What changed under Governor Pritzker compared to prior administrations? The answer seems clear. He worked hard to remake the PRB to something that fit his political views, his philosophy on criminal justice. I don't know how else you justify appointing a convicted double murderer to serve on the board. Governor Pritzker played games with appointments. He pulled nominees before deadlines for confirmation and then reappointed them, ensuring that they could continue to cast votes and serve on the Prisoner Review Board without Senate oversight. Now we are here once again talking about the PRB after they released a man who had orders of protection against him so that he could go out and less than 24 hours later tried to kill a pregnant woman that needed protection, and instead killing her son when the child tried bravely to defend his mother. If you can't see the need for reform here, you're just not looking. This is why we're here once again to introduce legislation to finally undo the damage Governor J.B. Pritzker's administration has done to the Prisoner Review Board and to make the streets of Illinois safer for our families and communities. With that, I'd like to turn it over to State Senator Steve McClure.
Thank you, Senator Plummer. 1 in 4 women aged 18 and older in the United States have been the victim of severe physical violence by an intimate partner in their lifetime. And most female victims of intimate partner violence were previously victimized by the same offender. In fact, 77% of women aged 18 to 24 were previously victimized. 76% of women ages 25 to 34 were previously victimized, and 81% of women ages 35 to 49 were previously victimized. This case is a tragic example of an all too common problem in this country, and it's a clear demonstration of how dangerous these situations are. Grissetti Brand had previous convictions for home invasion, causing injury, and violation of an order of protection. Not long after being released on parole, he threatened Lateria Smith and went to her home, despite it being a violation of his parole and the order of protection that was in place against him. Violating that order of protection was a red flag that should not have been missed. I'm preparing to file legislation that would increase the penalty for violating an order of protection and ensuring that this crime, which in this case was a clear indication of escalating violence toward this family, is treated with the seriousness it deserves. My legislation would increase the penalty for violating an order of protection, and a first-time violation would increase from a misdemeanor to a Class 4 felony. And if someone violates again, that conviction would increase it from a Class 4 felony to a Class 3 felony. A Class 3 felony is a much more serious felony than a Class 4 felony, and it would demonstrate the seriousness of the offense. And I think most prosecutors would agree that a simple misdemeanor is not severe enough for someone who's violating such a serious order from the court. And with that, I will turn it over to Leader John Kern.
Thank you, Senator McClure. I want to start by expressing my sincere condolences to the family of Jaden Perkins, especially to his mother, Lateria Smith, who has suffered an unimaginable loss. No parent should suffer the loss of a child, let alone in the circumstances around Jaden's death here. are just horrific. This never should have happened. Many areas of our criminal justice system failed Ms. Smith and Jaden. But at the end of the day, it was the Governor Pritzker's Prison Review Board that released Cressetti Brand, despite overwhelming evidence he was dangerous to this family. For years, we have called for serious overhaul of the PRB. And today we are taking a step forward in that process and introducing reforms that will put victims first, take politics out of the appointment process, and hold the board accountable for decisions. My legislation would put victims first by requiring the PRB to make every effort possible to immediately inform a victim when an inmate is being released. Whether it's early release, a commutation, or like in this situation, the outcome of a revocation hearing after an offender has violated the conditions of their parole. It is critical a victim knows that someone who could be a danger to them is out of prison. The devastating death of a child at the hands of a violent criminal with a pronounced history of domestic violence shows the critical need to better educate board members on the dangers, patterns, warning signs, and outcomes of domestic violence. My legislation requires all PRB board members to complete yearly training on domestic violence and sexual assault so they may better understand how these crimes impact the women and children who become victims. For too long, these $100,000 a year positions on the Prison Review Board have been given to political appointees who don't have the requisite experience to make these life and death decisions. We must take politics out of the appointment process to create a qualified board with a deep understanding of the criminal justice system. Under my legislation, members of the board would be required to have at least 20 cumulative years of experience working in the criminal justice system as a prosecutor, a criminal defense attorney, a judge, a probation officer, or a public defender. Finally, we must be able to hold members of the board accountable for the decisions they make. Currently, decisions about revocating parole, like in the case of Cressetti Brand, are made entirely in secret with only the outcome being known. My legislation would add critical transparency to these cases, requiring the board to provide a public written notice within 24 hours when a decision has been made to release. This notification would require not just any relevant notes about the information presented in the case, but also information about the board's deliberations and perhaps most importantly, the members' votes. This transparency is key to holding the board accountable for the decisions it makes. This legislation is an important step forward, but it's important we're clear that the Prison Review Board isn't the only entity under Governor Pritzker's control that failed Ms. Smith. The PRB voted to release Brand despite overwhelming evidence it already possessed that he was dangerous. But it was the Department of Corrections that gave him the green light despite knowing that Ms. Smith had sought an additional order of protection. The Department of Corrections was notified of Lataria Smith's attempt to get another order of protection on an emergency basis on February 22nd, 3 weeks before Brand brutally attacked Ms. Smith and killed her 11-year-old son, Jaden. Ms. Smith did everything possible to protect her family through the legal process. And let me repeat, she did everything she could. But the Department of Corrections failed to pass along this critical information to the Prison Review Board. Sadly, this is yet another example of mismanagement under an agency under Governor Pritzker's control. The governor always seems to find creative ways to deflect blame and abdicate his responsibility when something goes wrong. But he is in direct control of the Department of Corrections. And I would like to know how Governor Pritzker plans to address the failures at that agency. Honestly, there isn't a clearer life and death example of the need for him to focus on managing the agencies under his control. With that, we would open it up for questions.
Thank you. All right, first question we have from Greg Bishop, and it is, what is the significance of not just Miller resigning, but the chairman of the PRB resigning?
setting aside the resignations, which were necessary, we need to move beyond that. We need to raise the qualifications of all board members at this agency. It is clear from the record, the scant part of the record we have in this case, that there was a complete lack of understanding of the evidentiary standard, preponderance of the evidence, as well as the information before the board on the dangers that Mr. Brand presented to Ms. Smith. So I believe that we've got to raise the minimum qualifications across the board to ensure we have people that are actually practiced and have experience in the criminal justice system, experience with the standards of evidence, and have practice in making decisions like this.
Thank you, Leader. So second question is from Tina at the Sun-Times, and this is also a question for Leader Kern. Have the Democrats and the governor shown any indication that they would be willing to work with Republicans on these reforms to the board?
We've been working on this to land at a comprehensive proposal. I look forward to talking to my Senate Democratic colleagues about the path we want to chart forward for this board. I'm hopeful we'll get a full hearing on this. This is a starting point where we're coming from. I know others are going to have some, input and opinions on that, but ultimately, at the end of the day, it should be everyone's collective desire to improve the performance at this board and ensure that public safety is paramount.
Thank you. The next question we have is from Jeremy with the Chicago Tribune. So Democrats in the supermajority have shown a lot of resistance to penalty enhancements. But given what unfolded with the Cressetti Brand case at the PRB, has the Senate GOP gotten any sense in the last 2 weeks whether Democrats would go for penalty enhancements for violations of orders of protection like Senator McClure is proposing?
We have not seen any interest on penalty enhancements in the General Assembly as we continue to see victims suffering, and it's really the same type of abuses. The only way we think to stem this is to actually raise those penalties. We're going to continue to push for that shift in public policy. At some point, the majority party is going to need to come along if they truly have the public safety at mind.
Thank you, Leader. We have another question from Greg Bishop. This one is, how do Senate Republicans aim to hold the governor accountable to adhering to the appointment process at the PRB?
We have very little faith in the governor's how he views the PRB and those that he seeks to appoint. That's why we are seeking to actually tie the governor's hands and raise the minimum qualifications across the board on this critical agency. Requiring the governor to actually find people with broad-based experience in the criminal justice system will elevate the board as a whole. So we look forward to having these conversations. We look forward to trying to get buy-in from our Democratic colleagues in the legislature. And really, this is a way to I think the governor has failed, quite frankly, with the Prison Review Board. And this is a way to kind of take that out of his hands partly.
Thank you. So this next question is from John O'Connor with the AP. So John, I'm going to try to read what you said, but if I confuse anything, just text me and I will fix it. But so define standard correctly. The hearing is conducted by one person, in this case, Miller, critical, and then the report is shared with 2 other members. With broad basics, should the hearing include more than just one number?
Yes. I mean, this is supposed to be a board of 15, John. It absolutely should have more than one member conducting this hearing. And clearly in this instance, we had a member conducting the hearing that had no background in evidentiary standards, in balancing and weighing evidence. There was an abundance of evidence here to continue to hold Mr. Brand. and her recommendation to her fellow board members to release him has proven to be tragic to Miss Smith, her family, and never should have happened.
Yeah, and one thing to add to that too is, in addition to more people being involved in the process, I think the board as a whole needs to be more transparent. We've had significant issues over the last 3 or 4 years, and the governor's office has done nothing to remedy these issues. The PRB has been unresponsive to FOIAs. They've not been posting their deliberations or the minutes of their meetings online the way that they're required to. So in addition to more people being involved, I think the public has the right to know more about the deliberations and the process. And this Governor Pritzker's administration has resisted every effort we've made to make this process more transparent for the people of Illinois.
Thank you, Senator. I have another question from Patrick Fingston for Senators Plummer and McClure. Can you expand on tensions you've seen between Senate Democrats and the governor's appointments in the Executive Appointments Committee?
Well, thanks for the question. I would say, one of the first questions that was asked today was, in regards to our comments or our thoughts about the resignations. We have been raising red flags. We've been warning about the lack of qualifications of some of the governor's appointees for years, literally years. And those of you in the media that have been following the story know that. I don't know why it's taken a dead child for people to finally recognize some of these people were not qualified to serve on the board. What I've witnessed in the committee is my Democrat colleagues have largely taken a step back and allowed the governor's office to drive this issue, drive the train, and their unwillingness to, I think, do the right thing when it came to some of these appointees at the right moment in time has led to a board that has allowed this tragedy to take place. I'm very disappointed in the way that that's unfolded, and we need to work together to correct that so it doesn't happen in the future.
Yes, and I would say initially when you had this controversy emerge, we brought up case after case where the PRB made the wrong decision and released somebody who should never have been released from custody. Now, for this particular person, Miss Miller, the Democrats waited like a year or something like that before they called her for a vote on the floor. And I suspect that many of the Democrats in the Senate were thinking that, okay, she's learned her lesson now. And even though she had some of the same bad votes as other members, a year has passed. It was a big story. In some cases, it was covered nationally, what happened at the PRB. And she learned her lesson. And then all of a sudden we find out that in fact, she didn't learn her lesson, and that the things that myself and Senator Plummer have been saying in committee were still true to this day. And I think that, and I would hope that the Democrats in the Senate now realize that Governor Pritzker has a policy of trying to get the most far left anti-victim people on the Prisoner Review Board. And that's exactly who he's got. And whether you wait a year to vote on them or not, they are still the same person. And my hope is that moving forward, the Democrats have learned their lesson in the state Senate.
Thank you, Senators. The next question is from Mike Militich. So the governor said yesterday that Republicans have made the appointment process too political. Do you feel that is a fair assessment? And how can people be motivated to sit on the board?
That's ridiculous. Let me guess. The governor probably called us racist or xenophobes when he went ahead and made that statement. I mean, the government, this is yet again another agency. We've been talking about DCFS, Veteran Affairs, IDFPR. We have the financial scandal with IEMA. And here we have the Prison Review Board and DOC, both complicit in the death of a child. And the governor talks about a process being political. Please, it's nonsense. Governor needs to lead. We've had enough of his failures to run the agencies under his control. We want to move past that. And we are putting out reforms for the agency he has. We have no faith in his ability to actually identify learned and experienced board members, we're raising the floor on that with this proposal. So the governor needs to step up and concentrate on the job he was elected to do, and that is run these agencies under his control that continue to fail the people of Illinois, oftentimes with serious, dire, and sometimes deadly consequences.
Thank you. And then the last question I have as of right now is also from Tina. The board is now down to 2 Republicans. Is there any chance that the governor will slow roll the new appointments? And what can be done if that happens?
We're going to continue to call it out if he does. We have laid out what we're looking for in a member to be appointed. We have a minimum threshold here. There is an abundance of talented people out there. This is a board that historically has been a second career. We want experienced people in the criminal justice system. And if the governor needs any help on finding people that meet the qualification we've set forward that are Republicans, happy to do that.